My name is Kimberly Taylor, and I built Taylor Properties from nothing. At 32, I'm the CEO of the most successful residential development company in Cedar Falls. People know me for two things. I deliver what I promise, and I protect what's mine with precision. My European grandmother taught me to trust people, but always verify. I thought I'd married a man who understood that. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday evening in October when my 7-year-old son whispered 5 words that saved my life. "Mom, we have to go." But it wasn't what Lucas said that made my blood turn to ice. It was the look in his eyes. Pure terror. Not childish fear, but genuine terror. The fear of a child who'd just heard adults planning something terrible. My hands shook as I looked at my son in the doorway of my home office, his face pale, his body trembling. In that moment, I knew with certainty that my husband Marcus was trying to kill me, and my best friend Rebecca was helping him. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had everything you believed shatter in an instant, where the people you trusted revealed themselves to be strangers? That's what happened to me. But what they didn't know was that I'd been protecting myself all along. My grandmother's voice. Document everything. Keep records. Trust your instincts. I just never thought I'd need that advice to save my life from my own husband. I grew up as the disappointment in a traditional family. My sister Charlotte was the golden child who married well. I wanted to talk business at family dinners. I chose ambition over approval. My grandmother was different. She'd emigrated from Europe with nothing and built her own business when women weren't supposed to. When she died, she left me $50,000 and a letter. Build something they can't take from you, but always protect yourself. The world isn't kind to women who succeed. I started Taylor Properties at 24. 80-hour weeks, contractors who wouldn't take me seriously, banks that questioned everything. I learned to be harder than expected. I documented everything, trusted my instincts even when called paranoid. I met Marcus at 23 in a coffee shop. He was charming, supportive, different. He said he admired my drive, wanted to be with a woman going places. We married 9 months later. My family finally approved. Marcus came from a good family, worked in finance, seemed proud of my success. I thought I'd proven them wrong. I could have it all. Then came Rebecca, my college roommate who'd been there through everything. When the business expanded 5 years ago, I brought her in as partner. She understood the industry, and I trusted her completely. Lucas called her Auntie Becca. She was family, but there were signs. 6 months ago, Marcus became concerned about life insurance. "We need to protect Lucas's future," he said. I signed because I trusted him. Rebecca pushed for business restructuring. "We need succession planning. What happens if something happens to you?" She drafted documents transferring my shares to the surviving partner if I died. I signed because I trusted her. They were careful, patient. Marcus encouraged dangerous site inspections. "You need to see everything firsthand." Rebecca scheduled late-night visits alone. Contractors respect you more when you show up unannounced. They built a routine where I'd be alone, in dangerous places, at predictable times. I never told anyone about the security system I'd installed after equipment theft 3 years ago. Cameras throughout my house, office, car, audio recording capabilities, my grandmother's voice. Protect yourself. Document everything. It seemed paranoid then. Now I understand it was survival instinct. The week before Lucas saved my life, Marcus suggested a romantic getaway. Just us. Lucas can stay with Rebecca. The night before, he asked about my schedule with unusual specificity. "So you're definitely checking Riverside tomorrow night?" After dark? I should have seen it. But you don't want to believe the person beside you is planning murder. So you explain it away. You tell yourself you're paranoid. You remember your family calling you cold, and you try to be warmer, more trusting. But they had no idea what was coming next. That Tuesday started normally. Up at 5:30 morning run, got Lucas ready. Marcus kissed me goodbye. Love you. Be safe today. Rebecca texted the schedule. Meetings, site visits, evening inspection at Riverside. Foundation pour happened yesterday. Check it tonight before it sets. My childhood was systematic dismissal. Family dinners where my father praised Charlotte's husband and asked when I'd settle down and stop playing businesswoman. My mother's sighs. It's not feminine. Men don't like women who are too ambitious. Every achievement was diminished. First property developed? Well, your grandmother's money helped. First year of profit? Lucky timing. Business magazine feature? Shame you don't have time for family. Marcus's family was exactly like mine, traditional, judgmental. His mother, "Oh, you're the businesswoman. How interesting." His father laughed when I said I wasn't married. Too busy building your empire? I should have run. But Marcus defended me that night, said I was brilliant and driven. He made me feel seen in a way my family never had. That's how they get you. They find the wound and press gently, healing it, until you don't notice when they push the knife deeper. But I had secrets. My grandmother taught me strength isn't about being liked, it's about being prepared. I kept records of everything, security systems, separate accounts, backup plans for backup plans. When I brought Rebecca into the business, I was careful. Partnership agreements, regular audits, separate access codes. She joked about it. "You're so paranoid. Do you trust anyone?" I'd laugh, but never changed my systems. Marcus and Rebecca's relationship seemed normal, friendly, appropriate. He was married to me. She was my best friend. Perfect, right? Now I realize how carefully they maintained that facade. Never too close in public, never too distant, always appropriate. They'd been planning for years, knowing I was observant. The supportive husband, the loyal friend, both encouraging me to work harder, take risks, be independent. "You don't need us at site visits. You're the boss." Every time they encouraged my independence, they were isolating me. Every time they praised my fearlessness, they set up my recklessness. The life insurance was $3 million. Rebecca's restructuring would give her full control if I died. They'd taken loans against my company with forged documents, been embezzling for months. Marcus had gambling debts, $400,000 to casinos and bookmakers. Rebecca's previous business had failed amid fraud accusations. They both needed money desperately. The worst part? They'd been sleeping together for 2 years. In my house. In my bed when I was traveling. That Tuesday evening, Marcus left at 6. "Emergency client meeting. Be back in an hour." Lucas was supposed to be asleep by 8. I was supposed to leave for Riverside at 8:30. Alone, in the dark, no cell service, no witnesses. I was reviewing blueprints when Lucas appeared in dinosaur pajamas, face pale, eyes wide. "Mommy," he whispered, glancing toward the stairs. "We have to leave. Right now." "Lucas, what's wrong?" He came closer, voice dropping. "Daddy's going to hurt you. Aunt Becca, too. I heard them." My heart stopped. "What did you hear, baby?" I went downstairs for water. They were in the garage on the phone. Daddy said, "Tonight's the night. The accident will happen at the construction site." And Aunt Becca said, "Once she's gone, we'll have everything. The business, the insurance, each other." Everything clicked. The insurance, the restructuring, tonight's inspection, Marcus's alibi meeting. Rebecca had sabotaged something at Riverside, something that would kill me and look like an accident. My phone buzzed. Marcus. Meeting running late. Don't wait up. Love you. He was setting up his alibi while Rebecca prepared the site. When I showed up to inspect the foundation, I wouldn't leave alive. Lucas, get your shoes. We're leaving now. I grabbed my purse, laptop, and the external hard drives with security footage. As I drove to the police station, I made calls. My lawyer. Karen, meet me at Cedar Falls Police. Emergency. My security manager. David, secure all my properties now. No one gets access, especially Riverside. Lucas was quiet in the back seat. Mommy, are we going to be okay? Yes, baby. You were so brave. You saved us. At the police station, Detective Sarah Martinez listened seriously. Lucas repeated what he'd heard with remarkable clarity. Mrs. Taylor, Detective Martinez said, we need to send officers to your home and Riverside immediately. David arrived with equipment. Boss, I've called the structural engineering firm. They can meet us at Riverside within the hour. The wellness check found my house empty. Marcus's meeting was a lie. The restaurant had no reservation. His credit card showed gas purchased 3 hours away. The Riverside inspection was damning. Engineers found deliberately weakened scaffolding, loose guardrails, compromised supports. If I'd climbed up to inspect, the entire structure would have collapsed. This wasn't an accident, the engineer said. Someone with construction knowledge deliberately sabotaged this. The most devastating evidence came from my security footage. Hours of Marcus and Rebecca together. In my kitchen discussing plans. In my living room laughing about how trusting I was. In my bedroom talking about their future after I was gone. We'll be set for life, Rebecca's voice on the recording. With the insurance and business restructuring, I'll control everything. Marcus responded, no one will question it. She's always taking risks. It's the perfect accident. The footage was 6 months old. They'd been planning this in my own home. Detective Martinez watched grimly. We need warrants immediately for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and attempted homicide. Over 3 days in a secure hotel, the full picture emerged. Marcus owed $400,000 to casinos and bookmakers, people who send threats, not collection notices. Rebecca's previous business collapsed amid fraud accusations. She'd avoided prosecution by bankruptcy, but the reputation damage was severe. Working for me was her way back. But the discovery that made me ill came from Marcus's past. David found records showing Marcus had researched me for over a year before we met. Our coffee shop meeting hadn't been chance. It was calculated. Boss? David showed me the records. He targeted you. This was always the plan. Marcus married me for my money and business. When that wasn't enough, he recruited my best friend to help take everything permanently. Lucas asked that first hotel night, Mommy, why did Daddy want to hurt you? Don't people who love each other keep each other safe? I held him close. Some people are so broken they can't love properly. They only know how to take and hurt. But you're nothing like that. You're strong and good and brave. The betrayal was devastating. Not just Marcus, but Rebecca, the woman who'd been with me through every major moment. She'd celebrated my successes while planning to steal them, held Lucas as a baby while plotting to make him motherless. Thursday morning, Rebecca finally called, not knowing I was with police, not knowing we'd found the sabotage. Kim, I've been trying to reach you. Marcus said you weren't answering. Are you okay? I'm fine, Rebecca. Why wouldn't I be? You were supposed to inspect Riverside last night, and when you didn't answer, confusion in her voice. The plan had failed. I decided not to go. Lucas wasn't feeling well. Long pause. Oh, that's good. I'm glad. Where's Marcus? Another pause. I don't know. He's not answering my calls either. Your calls? I let the question hang, sharp. Why would he answer your calls, Rebecca? She realized her mistake. I just meant, as your business partner, I coordinate with Marcus sometimes. Right. My schedule. Like when you scheduled me to inspect Riverside alone last night. Tell me, what would have happened if I'd gone? Silence. I know everything. The sabotage, you and Marcus, the embezzlement, all of it. Police are on their way to you now. She hung up. Within an hour, they were found at a cabin 3 hours north, arrested without incident. Both shocked their perfect plan had failed. But I wasn't finished. The arrests were just beginning. Karen laid out the financial damage. Kim, they've embezzled over $2 million from Taylor Properties for 18 months. Shell companies, fake contractors, inflated costs. $2 million stolen to fund Marcus's gambling and their new life together. David revealed they'd also sabotaged my professional relationships. Contracts that fell through. Marcus had called clients, planting doubts about my stability. Mysterious project delays? Rebecca interfered with permits, creating problems she heroically solved. They'd been systematically undermining everything, so when I died, no one would question it. She was stressed, taking too many risks, working too hard. Marcus had forged my signature on additional insurance, bringing total coverage to $5 million. How did I miss this? I asked Karen. Because you trusted them. You were busy building a business and raising a son. You weren't looking for betrayal. The breaking point came when I learned about Rebecca's manipulation of Lucas, messages on her phone about gaining his trust, positioning herself as a second mother, ensuring that after I was gone, Lucas would accept her as a replacement. We need him to trust me completely, one message read. After Kim's gone, he'll see me as safe, as family. I'll help him through his grief. They'd been grooming my son, planning to raise him on stolen money, to erase me while pretending to honor my memory. I couldn't take it anymore. That was the last straw. My sadness transformed into something cold, focused, unforgiving. I made a decision with Lucas asleep in the next room. I wasn't just letting the legal system handle this. They'd tried to take everything, and now I would systematically dismantle everything they cared about. I called David. I need everything about Marcus's family, Rebecca's family, everyone connected to them. Assets, debts, vulnerabilities. David understood immediately. What are you planning? They tried to take everything from me. Now I'm going to show them what it feels like, piece by piece. You want to destroy them, David said. I want them to know they destroyed everyone they cared about. Over the next 2 weeks, while Marcus and Rebecca remained in jail, unable to make bail, I began my campaign. It wasn't impulsive. It wasn't emotional. It was calculated, precise, and absolutely devastating. Marcus's younger brother, Tyler, worked as a project manager at Riverside Construction, a company that did frequent business with Taylor Properties. I made a call to their CEO, a man who'd worked with my grandmother decades ago. James, I need to talk to you about Tyler Taylor. Tyler was fired within 24 hours, not because of anything he'd done, but because his brother had tried to murder me, and I'd made it clear that anyone associated with Marcus Taylor would find it difficult to work in Cedar Falls's construction industry. Rebecca's sister, Jennifer, ran a small event planning business. She'd built it slowly over 5 years, and it was finally starting to thrive. I made some calls to friends who sat on boards at local venues, country clubs, and corporate event spaces. Within a week, Jennifer found her permit applications delayed, her venue reservations mysteriously canceled, her vendor contracts suddenly unavailable. I wasn't destroying innocent people. I was making them feel the consequences of what their family members had done. I was forcing Marcus's and Rebecca's families to confront the monsters they'd raised, supported, and enabled. Marcus's mother, Patricia, had always looked down on me. Too ambitious, too aggressive, not feminine enough for her precious son. She lived in a beautiful house in the historic district, a house I discovered had a mortgage that had recently been sold to a property management company. A property management company I quietly acquired controlling interest in. The eviction notice was delivered on a Tuesday morning. Patricia called me, her voice shaking with rage. "Kimberly, you can't do this. I've lived in this house for 30 years. "Mrs. Taylor," I said coolly, "your son tried to murder me. He planned to leave my son without a mother. And you've spent years treating me like I wasn't good enough for your family. Now you're learning what happens when you underestimate people." "This is cruel," she sobbed. "I didn't do anything." "You raised a man who thought he could kill his wife for money," I said. "You're not innocent, Patricia. You're just surprised there are consequences." Rebecca's parents reached out through my lawyer. "Our daughter made a terrible mistake, but we're not responsible." Karen responded, "Your daughter planned a murder. She stole from me. She manipulated my child. Now you'll understand what it means to have your life systematically dismantled." Rebecca's father was a consultant for construction firms. I made calls. He couldn't get contracts, couldn't find work, couldn't maintain his comfortable lifestyle. I gave an interview to the local newspaper about betrayal and survival. I mentioned my husband and partner had attempted to murder me for money. The story went viral. National news covered it. Marcus's and Rebecca's families were recognized everywhere, whispered about, judged. Jennifer finally called directly. "Please, I have nothing to do with what Rebecca did. My business is dying. I have employees, a daughter to support." "Your sister tried to kill me," I said. "She planned to leave my 7-year-old without a mother. And you want me to care about your business?" "I didn't know." "Maybe you should have. Maybe you should have paid attention to who your sister really was." I felt nothing. No guilt, no sympathy. They wanted mercy from someone they'd tried to erase. David brought updates on Marcus's and Rebecca's reactions. Marcus raged in his cell, threatening lawsuits. Rebecca was quieter, more calculating. She knew me better. She understood I was just starting. The preliminary hearings revealed overwhelming evidence: phone records, financial documents, the sabotaged site, and hours of my security footage. The defense tried to negotiate. "Your client is destroying our clients' families. This vendetta must stop." "Vendetta?" Karen's voice was ice. "My client is exercising her legal rights. If those decisions affect people related to her attempted murderers, that's unfortunate coincidence. It's deliberate retaliation. Malicious." "Prove it," Karen said. "Prove my client is doing anything illegal. I'll wait." They couldn't. Everything I did was legal. Aggressive, ruthless, but legal. 3 weeks after arrest, Marcus and Rebecca understood the full scope. I wasn't just seeing them imprisoned. Every person they loved, every comfort they'd taken for granted, would be stripped away before prison. Marcus's father called. "Ms. Taylor, I'm begging you." My wife is losing her home. My younger son lost his job. Our savings are gone on legal fees. Please stop. Your son tried to kill me for money. He married me not because he loved me, but because he researched me for a year and saw me as an asset to exploit and dispose of. Did you know that? Silence. I didn't think so. You saw me as the problem, too ambitious, too cold. But your son is a would-be murderer, and now you'll understand what it means to be associated with someone like that. This isn't justice. This is revenge. You're right. Sweet, calculated, thoroughly documented revenge. And it's completely legal. That's the difference between me and your son. The defense offered a plea deal. Our clients will plead guilty to all charges in exchange for Ms. Taylor ceasing her campaign against their families. I laughed. Tell them no. Maximum sentences, full restitution, public admission of everything they did. What I'm doing to their families continues regardless. The trial was set for 2 months. The prosecutor was confident. Video, audio, physical evidence, financial records. This is as sure as it gets. But I wasn't taking chances. I hired private investigators to ensure every piece of evidence was airtight. I had forensic accountants trace every dollar they'd stolen. I had structural engineers document every detail of how they'd sabotaged the Riverside site. Lucas was in therapy, processing what his father had done, what Aunt Becca had planned. His therapist told me he was remarkably resilient, but that he had nightmares sometimes. Dreams where he didn't warn me in time, where he lost me. I'm here, baby, I told him every time he woke up scared. You saved me. You were so brave. And now we're safe. Is Daddy ever coming home? He asked one night. No, sweetheart, I said honestly. Daddy made very bad choices. He tried to hurt me, and people who do that have to face consequences. What about Aunt Becca? She's not your aunt anymore, I said firmly. She pretended to love us, but she was only pretending. Real family doesn't hurt each other. Lucas nodded slowly. Are we going to be okay? We're going to be better than okay, I promised, because now we know who we can trust and who we can't. And that makes us stronger. But privately, I was still reeling. The magnitude of the betrayal, the years of lies, the meticulous planning of my murder, it all felt surreal. I'd built Taylor Properties through intelligence and hard work. I'd created a successful life through careful planning and smart decisions. And I'd been completely blind to the 2 people closest to me plotting my death. David found me one evening in my hotel room, staring at financial reports without really seeing them. Boss, you need to take a break. I can't, I said. Every time I stop, I remember. I remember him kissing me goodbye that morning. I remember Rebecca hugging Lucas. I remember trusting them completely. They betrayed you, David said quietly. But they didn't break you. Look at what you've done in 3 weeks. You've secured the evidence, protected your business, and dismantled their support systems. That's not weakness, Kim. That's strength. It's rage, I corrected. It's cold, calculated rage. Maybe, David agreed, but it's also justice. They tried to erase you, and instead, you're erasing them. Every single piece of their lives, one by one, until there's nothing left. He was right. By the time Marcus and Rebecca went to trial, they would have nothing. No family support because I'd made sure their families were too busy dealing with consequences. No financial resources because I'd frozen and seized everything I legally could. No public sympathy because everyone knew what they'd done. And I was just getting started. The trial began on a cold Monday in December. I sat in the courtroom, Lucas safe at home with his therapist-approved babysitter, and watched Marcus and Rebecca enter in their orange jumpsuits. They looked diminished, smaller somehow. Prison does that to people, I suppose. Or maybe it was the realization that they'd lost everything. The prosecution opened with my security footage. The courtroom watched as Marcus and Rebecca discussed my murder in my kitchen, in my living room, in my bedroom. You could hear the gasps from the gallery, the shocked whispers. "She's always so careful," Rebecca's voice came through the speakers. "But she's also predictable. She does site visits alone because she thinks it makes her look dedicated." Marcus's voice responded, "Once she's gone, we just have to play the grieving husband and devastated best friend. Everyone will believe it because they want to believe it. People don't like to think that someone could plan something like this." The jury looked disgusted. Several looked at me with sympathy, with horror, with recognition that what had almost happened to me could happen to anyone. But what Marcus and Rebecca didn't know, what no one except David and Karen knew, was that I had more evidence. Evidence I'd been holding back, waiting for the right moment. My grandmother hadn't just taught me to document everything. She'd taught me to protect my assets in ways that made them virtually untouchable. When I started Taylor Properties, she'd helped me set up a complex series of trusts and legal protections. Corporate structures that separated my personal assets from my business assets. Accounts that required multiple signatures for access. Property held in trust for Lucas that no one could touch. Marcus had thought that marrying me gave him access to everything. Rebecca had thought that our partnership agreement gave her control of the business if I died. They were both wrong. The prosecution called Karen to the stand. "Can you explain the actual structure of Taylor Properties and Ms. Taylor's assets?" Karen pulled out documents. "Taylor Properties is not a simple corporation. It's part of a trust structure established by Ms. Taylor's grandmother 20 years ago and updated by Ms. Taylor when she inherited it. The business itself is owned by the Kimberly Taylor Business Trust. Ms. Taylor is the primary beneficiary and manager, but she cannot unilaterally transfer ownership." "What does that mean in practice?" the prosecutor asked. "It means that even if Ms. Taylor had died, the business wouldn't have automatically gone to her husband or her business partner. It would have been held in trust for her son until he reached age 25, managed by a board of trustees that includes myself, her accountant, and 2 industry professionals. The life insurance money would have gone into the same trust." The courtroom stirred. I watched Marcus's face turn pale. He was realizing that even if he'd succeeded in killing me, he wouldn't have gotten what he wanted. "What about the partnership agreement with Ms. Chen?" the prosecutor continued. "The partnership agreement gave Ms. Chen operational control of certain aspects of the business, but not ownership. She was an employee with profit sharing, essentially. If Ms. Taylor died, Ms. Chen would have been entitled to a severance package, nothing more." Rebecca's lawyer shot to his feet. "Objection! This is irrelevant to the charges." "Your Honor," the prosecutor said calmly, "this establishes motive and shows premeditation. The defendants believe they would inherit Ms. Taylor's business and wealth. This testimony shows they were wrong, which means they went to all this effort to commit murder and fraud for nothing." The judge allowed it. Karen continued, explaining how the life insurance policies would have paid out to the trust, not to Marcus personally. How the embezzlement had been caught by automated audit systems I'd installed years ago, but that I hadn't acted on immediately because I'd been gathering evidence. "Let me be clear," Karen said. "Ms. Taylor knew about the embezzlement for 3 months before her son overheard the murder plot. She was building a case, documenting everything, preparing for legal action. If Mr. Taylor and Ms. Chen had simply stolen money and disappeared, they would have been caught within weeks." I saw the realization hit Marcus. All that planning, all that manipulation, and he'd never had a chance. I'd been protecting myself the entire time in ways he'd never even considered. Then came David's testimony. He explained the security systems, the surveillance, the careful documentation. He walked the jury through how he'd investigated Marcus's background and discovered the targeted nature of our meeting. Mr. Taylor didn't just happen to meet Ms. Taylor in that coffee shop, David testified. He'd researched her business for over a year. He knew her schedule, her habits, her routines. He positioned himself to meet her, to become part of her life. The defense tried to object, but David had documentation. Records of Marcus accessing public databases about Taylor properties. His presence at industry events where I was speaking. A pattern of deliberate proximity before we ever officially met. This was always a long-term con, David said bluntly. Mr. Taylor married Ms. Taylor with the intention of eventually murdering her for financial gain. When he realized that simple inheritance wouldn't work due to the trust structure, he recruited Ms. Chen to help him embezzle funds and plan a murder that would look like an accident. But the real bombshell came when the prosecution revealed evidence I'd just uncovered 2 weeks before trial. Evidence about Rebecca's background that changed everything. Rebecca's previous business failure hadn't been bad luck or poor management. She'd been investigated for insurance fraud, a fire at one of her properties that was deemed suspicious but unproven. An employee who died in that fire, a death ruled accidental, but questioned by that employee's family. Ms. Chen has a history of suspicious incidents involving people who stood in her way, the prosecutor told the jury. The employee who died in the fire had discovered financial irregularities and was planning to report them. The fire happened the night before she was scheduled to meet with authorities. Rebecca's face went white. This wasn't public record, wasn't part of her official history. How had I found it? The answer was simple. I'd spent a significant amount of my recently recovered embezzled funds to hire the best investigators in the country, people who could dig deeper than public records, who could find witnesses who'd been too scared to come forward years ago, who could connect dots that had been deliberately obscured. The employee's sister testified, tearful and angry. I always knew Rebecca Chen was involved in my sister's death, but no one would listen to me. She was too smart, too careful. She made it look like an accident. The pattern was clear. Rebecca had killed before, or at least was strongly suspected of it, and she'd tried to do it again with me. Marcus's defense crumbled. His lawyer tried to argue that he'd been manipulated by Rebecca, that he was a victim of her influence. But the security footage showed otherwise. Marcus had been an enthusiastic participant in planning my murder, often suggesting details, refining plans. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for, the moment when they realized just how thoroughly I'd destroyed them. The prosecution called Rebecca's sister Jennifer to the stand. She looked exhausted, defeated. "Ms. Warner," the prosecutor said gently, "can you describe your relationship with your sister?" "We were close," Jennifer said quietly. "Or I thought we were, until I learned what she'd done, until I learned she was capable of murder." "Have you had any contact with the defendant since her arrest?" "No," Jennifer said. "I wrote her a letter telling her I never wanted to see her again, that she'd destroyed our family, that I had to close my business because of what she'd done, because no one wants to hire the sister of a would-be murderer." Rebecca was crying silently at the defense table. Jennifer wouldn't look at her. "Why did you agree to testify?" the prosecutor asked. "Because Ms. Taylor is right," Jennifer said, finally looking at me. "My sister tried to kill her, tried to take away a little boy's mother, and I need to stand here and say publicly that I condemn what she did, that I'm not like her, that our family isn't like her." It was the same with Marcus's family. His brother Tyler testified that Marcus had always been the favored son, always got away with things, always believed he deserved more than he'd earned. When I lost my job, Tyler said, I was angry. I blamed Ms. Taylor. But then I learned what Marcus had done, and I realized that she was right to make us face consequences. We enabled him. We made excuses for him. We're not innocent. One by one, members of their families testified, not because they wanted to, but because I'd made it clear that their only path to any kind of redemption was public denunciation of Marcus and Rebecca. It was cruel, perhaps, but it was also effective. The physical evidence sealed their fate. The sabotaged construction site was damning enough, but the forensic analysis showed that Rebecca had been the one to weaken the scaffolding. Her fingerprints were on tools found at the scene, tools taken from Taylor Properties inventory. Marcus's credit card showed he'd purchased materials used in the sabotage. The financial evidence showed years of planning. Shell companies established in various names. Money systematically moved from Taylor Properties accounts into those shells. The life insurance policies Marcus had forged my signature on. The business loan taken out in my name without my knowledge. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the prosecutor said in his closing argument, this wasn't a crime of passion. This wasn't a mistake or an impulse. This was a calculated, methodical plan to murder Kimberly Taylor and steal everything she'd built. The defendants spent years positioning themselves, manipulating her, setting up financial structures to profit from her death. And they very nearly succeeded. Only the brave actions of a 7-year-old boy saved his mother's life. The defense had nothing. They tried to argue diminished capacity, emotional distress, anything to reduce the charges. But the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, their verdict was unanimous on all counts. Guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, guilty of attempted murder, guilty of fraud, guilty of embezzlement, guilty on 23 separate counts. Marcus slumped in his chair. Rebecca stared straight ahead, her face blank. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. The judge looked at both defendants with undisguised contempt. I have reviewed the evidence in this case extensively. The level of premeditation, the years of manipulation, the absolute betrayal of trust. These are among the most egregious circumstances I've encountered in 20 years on the bench. He sentenced Marcus to 25 years to life. He sentenced Rebecca to 30 years to life, citing her suspected involvement in the previous death and her position of trust as both friend and business partner. As they were led away, Rebecca finally looked at me. There was hatred in her eyes, but also something else. Fear. Because she knew I wasn't finished. The criminal trial was over, but the civil suits were just beginning. I was suing for the return of all embezzled funds, for emotional distress, for the cost of the trial, for punitive damages. My lawyers estimated I would be awarded nearly $7 million in judgment. Marcus and Rebecca would spend decades in prison, and when they got out, if they got out, they would owe me money they could never repay. Their wages would be garnished forever. They would never be able to own property, start businesses, or live comfortable lives. They would be permanently marked as attempted murderers, unemployable and unwelcome everywhere they went. But the sweetest revenge wasn't the prison sentences or the financial judgments. It was watching their families publicly denounce them. It was seeing Marcus's mother interviewed on local news, tearfully apologizing to me and admitting her son was a monster. It was Rebecca's father writing an op-ed about the dangers of enabling bad behavior in children. I'd done more than get justice. I'd made sure that Marcus and Rebecca would be forgotten, dismissed, erased from the lives of everyone they'd ever cared about. They would sit in prison with nothing and no one, living with the knowledge that they'd gambled everything and lost. My grandmother once told me that the best revenge is living well. But sometimes, I thought, the best revenge is making sure your enemies live poorly, very poorly, for a very long time, very long. 1 year later, Lucas and I stood in the doorway of our new house. Not the house Marcus had touched, not the place where they'd plotted my death. A new house in a new neighborhood, built by Taylor Properties with specifications I'd designed myself. State-of-the-art security, safe and strong and completely ours. "Do you like it, baby?" I asked Lucas, now 8 years old and thriving in ways I'd worried might not be possible after everything he'd been through. "It's perfect, Mom," he said, then grinned. "And it has the best security system ever. No bad guys are getting in here." He was right about that, but more importantly, no bad guys were already inside. I'd learned that lesson thoroughly. Taylor Properties had grown by 30% in the past year. The publicity from the trial, while initially uncomfortable, had ultimately worked in my favor. I was now known as the CEO who survived a murder plot through intelligence and preparation. Other women in business reached out, wanting to know how I'd protected myself, how I'd documented everything, how I'd turned potential tragedy into triumph. I'd started a foundation called the Trust But Verify Foundation, dedicated to teaching women in business how to protect themselves legally and financially. We offered free legal consultations, security assessments, and financial planning. The name came from my grandmother's advice, and the foundation honored her memory. Marcus's and Rebecca's families had slowly rebuilt their lives, but not before learning hard lessons about accountability. Patricia, Marcus's mother, now volunteered at a women's shelter, working with domestic violence survivors. "I enabled my son's sense of entitlement," she told me in a letter I actually read. "I taught him that he deserved things without earning them. I'm trying to do better." I'd stopped actively destroying their lives about 6 months after the trial, not because I'd forgiven them, but because there was nothing left to destroy. They'd hit bottom, learned their lessons, and were trying to make amends. That was enough. Rebecca's sister Jennifer had managed to rebuild her event planning business with a new name and a focus on women's professional events. She sent me a donation for the foundation with a note. "Thank you for showing me that enabling bad behavior helps no one. I'm teaching my daughter that actions have consequences." The money I'd recovered from the embezzlement had been returned to Taylor Properties and invested in expansion. I'd hired Maria, my assistant, who'd always had my back, as a partner. Not a silent partner like Rebecca had pretended to be, but a real partner with real stake in the company's success. Lucas called Maria Aunt Maria now, and this time it was genuine. She'd proven her loyalty, her integrity, her value. She was the kind of person who deserved trust because she'd earned it completely. "You know the difference between Aunt Becca and Aunt Maria?" Lucas asked me one day. "What's that, sweetheart?" "Aunt Maria never pretends. She's always real. Even when she's mad at me for not doing my homework, she's real." Out of the mouths of babes, my relationship with my parents had evolved too. They'd reached out after the trial, horrified by what had happened, guilty about how they'd treated me over the years. "We always thought you were too harsh, too ambitious, too cautious," my mother had said. "But you were just protecting yourself. We should have supported that." I'd set boundaries with them, polite but distant, involved with Lucas but not intimate. They'd lost the right to close family relationship when they'd spent decades making me feel like I wasn't enough. But I allowed them to be grandparents to Lucas under my terms, my supervision, my rules. Charlotte, my sister, had surprised me. She'd called shortly after the trial, angry and defensive at first. Mom says you're punishing them for supporting your husband. I'm protecting myself and my son, I'd corrected, like I've always done, like they never taught me to do. There was a long pause. I'm sorry, Charlotte finally said. I'm sorry we always made you feel like you had to be perfect. I'm sorry I let them favor me. I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you. It wasn't enough to rebuild a close sisterhood, but it was enough to start healing. We met for coffee once a month now, slowly getting to know each other as adults rather than as the golden child and the disappointment. But the most important relationship I'd rebuilt was with Lucas. Therapy had helped him process his father's betrayal, his realization that the man he'd trusted had planned to hurt his mother. His therapist said he was remarkably resilient, but that I needed to be patient with his fears and his nightmares. Sometimes, Lucas told me 6 months after the trial, I dream that I didn't tell you in time, that I stayed in bed and you went to that construction place and got hurt. But you did tell me, I reminded him. You were brave and smart and you saved us. That's what really happened. I know, he said, but sometimes I'm scared I'll miss something again, that I won't see danger coming. That's not your job, baby, I said firmly. You're 8 years old. It's my job to keep us safe, and I'm very good at my job. You just need to be a kid. Play, learn, grow. I'll handle the protection. He'd nodded, but I knew the fear lingered. So I'd installed visible security measures in our new house, let him help me test the alarms, showed him the monitoring systems, not to make him paranoid, but to help him feel safe. To let him see that I was prepared, that I was protecting us, that he didn't have to carry that burden. 1 year after the trial, I received a letter from Marcus. It had been screened by my lawyer first, checked to make sure it wasn't threatening or manipulative. Karen had summarized it. He's asking to see Lucas. He's claiming he's changed, that prison has made him realize his mistakes, that he deserves a chance to be a father. I'd laughed. Actually laughed. Write back and tell him no. Tell him he gave up the right to be a father when he planned to make his son an orphan. But Lucas had overheard. Did Daddy write to us? I'd shown him the letter, age-appropriate version. He wants to see you, but you don't have to if you don't want to. Lucas thought about it seriously, his face scrunched up the way it did when he was working through complex problems. Can we go see him? Just once? I want to ask him something. His therapist thought it might be helpful, a chance for closure. So on a cold Saturday in November, 2 years after he'd saved my life, Lucas and I drove to the state prison where Marcus was serving his sentence. Marcus looked older. Prison had aged him in ways that time alone couldn't explain. He tried to smile when he saw Lucas, tried to reach through the glass barrier between visitors and inmates. Lucas, he said, his voice cracking, you've gotten so big. Lucas stared at his father with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not afraid, not angry, just evaluating. Did you ever really love Mom? He asked. Marcus froze. Lucas, it's complicated. I made mistakes. I was stressed and scared and Did you ever really love her? Lucas repeated, his voice steady. Marcus couldn't answer. He looked down, away, anywhere but at his son's direct gaze. You taught me what love isn't, Lucas finally said. Mom taught me what strength is. We don't need you anymore. He stood up. I'm ready to go, Mom. As we walked away, I heard Marcus calling after us, apologizing, begging, pleading. Lucas didn't look back. Are you okay? I asked in the car. Yeah, he said. I just needed to see that he's still lying. Even now, he can't tell the truth. At least now I know for sure. My son, wise beyond his years. I'd started dating again, carefully and cautiously. David, my security manager, had become more than an employee. We'd grown close during the investigation, during the trial, during the rebuilding. He understood my need for documentation, for protection, for verification. He never pushed, never demanded trust he hadn't earned. "Take your time," he told me. "I'm not going anywhere." It was refreshing, being with someone who understood that trust was earned through actions, not just words, who proved his loyalty every day, not through grand gestures, but through consistent, reliable behavior. My grandmother's locket hung around my neck every day now, a reminder of real love versus fake. Inside was a picture of her and Lucas, 2 generations of the people I could truly trust. I'd been asked to speak at business conferences, women's leadership events, security conferences. My story resonated because it was real, because I'd survived, because I'd not only protected myself, but thrived afterward. The people closest to you can be your biggest threat, I told a room full of female entrepreneurs at a conference in Boston. But they can also be your greatest strength. The key is knowing the difference. Document everything. Trust but verify. Protect yourself legally and financially. And most importantly, teach your children to trust their instincts and speak up when something feels wrong. The standing ovation was nice, but the real reward was the women who approached me afterward. "You gave me the courage to check my business partner's books. You inspired me to install security systems. You taught me that protecting yourself isn't paranoid, it's smart." My business thrived. Taylor Properties was now the largest residential development company in 3 counties. I'd been featured on the cover of Business Weekly with the headline, "The CEO Who Documented Her Way to Survival." The article talked about my security systems, my trust structures, my meticulous record-keeping. It presented me as a role model for protective business practices. Rebecca's and Marcus's prison terms stretched ahead of them, decades of nothing. They'd both tried to appeal their sentences, claiming various procedural issues. Every appeal had been denied. They would both be in prison until they were in their 60s at the earliest. I'd visited Rebecca once, about 18 months after the trial. Not because I forgave her, but because I wanted her to see what she'd lost. I wanted her to understand the full scope of her failure. She'd looked smaller in her prison uniform, diminished. "Kim," she'd said, when she saw me through the glass. "I'm so sorry. I was greedy and stupid and I—" "Save it," I'd interrupted. "I didn't come here for an apology. I came here to make sure you understand something. You tried to take everything from me. My life, my business, my son, and instead, you lost everything. Your freedom, your reputation, your family. You'll be here for decades, and when you get out, if you get out, you'll owe me millions of dollars you'll never be able to pay." "I know," she'd whispered. "But more than that," I'd continued, "you'll be alone. Your sister won't speak to you. Your parents have disowned you. Your professional reputation is destroyed. You'll leave here with nothing and no one. And I want you to sit in this cell for the next 30 years, remembering that you did this to yourself." "You're right," Rebecca had said, tears streaming down her face. "I deserve this." "Yes," I'd agreed. "You do." I'd walked out of that prison feeling lighter. The anger that had driven me for months had finally transformed into something else. Not forgiveness, never that, but acceptance. Closure. The knowledge that justice had been served completely and thoroughly. The best revenge, really, is living well. And I was living very, very well. Lucas and I hosted Thanksgiving at our new house that year. Maria and her family came. David came. A few close friends from the industry, people who'd proven their loyalty. Even my parents and Charlotte, supervised and contained within boundaries I'd set. As I looked around the table at these people who'd earned their place in my life, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace, security, genuine happiness. "What are you grateful for this year, Mom?" Lucas asked during our traditional going around the table moment. "I'm grateful for you," I said, squeezing his hand. "For your bravery and your wisdom and your instincts. You saved our lives, baby." "I'm grateful we're safe," Lucas said, "and that we have real family now, not fake family." Out of the mouths of babes indeed. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and Lucas was asleep, I sat in my office, not the one Marcus had touched, but a new one in my new house, and updated my security logs. Old habits die hard, and honestly, I didn't want them to die. Documenting everything had saved my life. Being prepared had protected my son. Trusting but verifying had given me the evidence I needed for justice. I opened my grandmother's old diary, the one I'd found during the investigation. Her handwriting, elegant and precise, filled the pages with advice and observations. On the last page, written shortly before she died, was a note I returned to often. "Kimberly, my dear girl, if you're reading this, I'm gone. But I hope I've taught you well. Protect yourself always. Trust is earned, not given. Document everything, and remember, the world will tell you that you're too cautious, too cold, too calculating. Don't listen. Your caution is your strength. Your calculations keep you safe. And your coldness toward those who would harm you is not cruelty, it's wisdom. I love you. Build something they can't take from you." I had built something they couldn't take. Taylor Properties was mine, protected by trust structures and legal frameworks that made it virtually untouchable. My son was safe, happy, and learning to trust his instincts. My life was rebuilt on foundations of verified trust and documented truth. Marcus's and Rebecca's betrayal had taught me that my grandmother was right. The world isn't kind to women who succeed, and sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who will try to destroy you. But it had also taught me that I was stronger than I'd known, that I could survive betrayal and come out not just intact, but thriving. My 7-year-old son had whispered, "Mom, we have to go." And I'd listened. I'd trusted his instincts, acted immediately, and protected us both. That moment of trust in my child's wisdom had saved our lives. And now, 2 years later, we were more than survivors. We were victors. We were thriving. We were living proof that documentation, preparation, and fierce protective instinct could overcome even the most calculated betrayal. I closed my grandmother's diary and logged off my computer. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new projects, new opportunities. But tonight, I was simply grateful. Grateful for Lucas's bravery. Grateful for my grandmother's wisdom. Grateful for the hard lessons that had taught me to protect what matters most. Have you ever had someone you trusted completely betray you? Or has a child in your life ever surprised you with their wisdom and saved you from danger? Share your story in the comments. You might be helping someone else recognize the warning signs before it's too late. And if this story resonated with you, if you're in business or building something of your own, take my grandmother's advice. Document everything. Trust but verify. And never apologize for protecting yourself. The world needs strong women who refuse to be victims. Subscribe for more stories about women who didn't just survive betrayal, they thrived despite it. Remember, Sometimes the smallest voice carries the most important warning. Listen to your instincts. Protect yourself fiercely. And never, ever underestimate what you're capable of when someone threatens what you love. My name is Kimberly Taylor, and this is my story of survival, revenge, and the sweet justice that comes from being prepared for anything.